In 1955, a boiler man at a steel mill in Youngstown, Ohio, was buried on a Thursday morning. The foreman expected a dozen mourners. 400 people came. Men who had worked one shift beside him 20 years earlier drove in from 3 states. He was never promoted, never owned a car worth selling, never made a speech in his life. What he had was a set of standards, a handful of plain rules he carried onto the floor every morning for 31 years. Rules that made a man impossible to be remembered long after the mill itself was gone. Most of them died on the same days the men who lived them did. They moved through the world differently, not with apps or scripts or self-help books, but with standards pressed into them by fathers who knew exactly what kind of man they were building. Those standards made friends, held marriages, and turned a stranger into a name people spoke for years. We abandoned every one of them the moment we decided being yourself mattered more than being decent. This was not charm. It was a craft, tested by men who had nothing else to trade. Then the 70s arrived, and we called the whole code stiff. Old-fashioned. We replaced it with being natural, and a generation of working men grew old with no one left who remembered their names. Number 17 took less than 2 minutes and not 1 cent, and it made a stranger remember the man who used it for the rest of his life. Number 12 contradicts almost every piece of advice a young worker is handed today, and it is the one standard that made foremen ask for a man by name across 3 counties. And number 3, the rule these fathers enforced more fiercely than any other on the list, is now taught to corporate executives in a weekend seminar that runs $4,000 a seat. Their grandfathers taught it for nothing at a kitchen table before a boy was 10 years old. These 25 standards were not about being smooth. They were about being remembered. The difference between a man who worked 40 years and vanished and a man whose name still gets spoken at tables he will never sit at again. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 lost gentlemen's standards 1950s working-class men lived by that made them impossible to forget. Number 25, greet every man by name at the gate. This began before the whistle, before the work itself. You came through the gate and spoke to every man you passed, not a grunt, not a nod, but his name out loud, with a good morning behind it. The sweeper got it. The timekeeper got it. For a man who spent 10 hours invisible inside the noise of a machine, his name at the gate was the one moment someone saw him. In mill towns, a man who passed in silence was judged to be carrying a grudge. The naming kept the floor human in a place built to grind men down. The work paid his wages. The names paid everyone else's. Number 24, keep your shoes shined. A working man's clothes wore out. His shoes told a different story. You shined them at night, by the door, even when the leather underneath was cracked. A riveter in Pittsburgh did it every evening while his boy watched from the stairs. The suit could be borrowed and the shirt thin, but shined shoes said a man had not given up on himself, and people read it in a glance. A poor man with bright shoes was a man still fighting, and nobody forgets a man who refuses to quit on himself. Number 23, the handshake that held the eye. A handshake was not a greeting, it was a verdict. You gripped firm enough to mean it, never hard enough to prove something, and you kept your eyes on his the whole time. A pipe fitter in Gary taught his son that the second a man looked away mid-shake, the deal in his heart was already gone. On a hiring line where 40 men wanted 8 jobs, the foreman could not test character by talking, so he tested it by hand. The hand told the truth a resume could only claim. Number 22, Light the other man's cigarette first. When the pack came out, you struck the match for the man beside you before you ever touched your own. A foundry hand in Cleveland did it for 30 years for men he would never see again. The flame was nothing, a penny match, a cupped hand against the wind. But in that small second, you had served another man before yourself, and he felt it land. A stranger forgot 100 faces on a crowded platform. He remembered the one who lit his cigarette before his own. Number 21. The hat came off. The hat stayed on in the street and came off the moment you crossed a threshold, a kitchen, a church, an office. A brakeman in Altoona corrected his son with a single glance, and the boy's hand was at the brim before the look had finished. It was a small surrender, repeated daily, that told every room you knew you were a guest in the world. A man who kept his hat on was marked as raised rough, whatever he earned. The hat was nothing. Taking it off was everything. Humility, it turned out, is the most memorable thing a proud man can show.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us who still believe a good name and good manners mean something. It's the lost gentleman's code, the old-fashioned manners American gentlemen once lived by. The kind that make you the man everyone respects, welcome in any room you walk into. But these ways are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't spend another year being the man people overlook. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
Number 20. Give up your seat without a word. On a crowded streetcar, you were on your feet the instant someone older or more tired than you was standing. A machinist in Toledo taught his son that a young man's legs were given to him precisely so an old man's could rest. You rose and stepped aside so the other person never felt they owed you. The seat cost you a sore ride home. It bought a stranger the feeling of being worth more than your comfort. People remember the man who stood. They forget every man who pretended to be asleep. Number 19. Carry a clean handkerchief to give away. You carried 2. One for yourself and one folded clean and untouched for whoever might need it. A widow weeping at a graveside. A child with a skinned knee. A barber in Memphis pressed a spare every morning for 20 years and used his own when the moment came. The spare said you had walked out your door already thinking about someone other than yourself. People remember for the rest of their lives the hand that reached out at the exact moment theirs was empty. Number 18, pay your own way every time. You never let another man cover you, and you never let a tab sit. When the coffee came, your coin was already on the counter. When a friend bought lunch on Monday, you bought it back by Friday. A dockhand in Baltimore did it on wages that barely stretched, because owing a man money felt like owing him a piece of himself. But a man who always paid his way was a man no one could hold a debt over. A clean ledger kept a clean name. He owned little and owed no one. Number 17, use the man's name. When a man gave you his name, you used it 3 times in the next 2 minutes. Once to take it in, once in the middle, easily, once at the parting, on purpose. A streetcar dispatcher in Omaha lived by it, and within a week he knew every regular on his line. By the 3rd use, the name was set in him, and the other man felt seen in a way he could not explain. It was not a parlor trick. It was a refusal to let any man feel forgettable. Say it, and a stranger carries you home. Here is what nobody says out loud. 1. In 3 American men over 50 now reports having no close friends at all. Not one. Not because they are unlikable, but because somewhere between 1970 and today we traded a code of standards for a culture of self-expression. We stopped teaching boys how to walk onto a floor full of strangers and treat each one like he mattered. We told them to be authentic instead. Number 16, lend your back before you're asked. But authenticity is cold comfort to a man no one ever taught how to enter a room. The standards were never about manners for their own sake. They were a working man's tools for not dying alone. None of it charged a subscription. It just sat in a man's hands and told the truth every day until there was no one left to receive it. The heavy crate, the stuck wheel, the load up 4 flights. A man reached for it before the words for help had formed. A freight loader in Detroit taught his son that strength was given to be spent on other people, and a man who stood idle while another strained had wasted what he was handed. You did not wait to be asked. The lifting cost a sore back and bought a name that outlasted it. Strength shown off impressed no one. Strength quietly spent walked into rooms ahead of the man. Number 15, never complain about the work. The cold, the hours, the aching hands, the foreman who rode you. A man swallowed it in company and saved it for home, if he aired it at all. A streetcar operator in Akron taught his son that complaint is contagious, and the man who spreads it shrinks everyone's day to enlarge his own. To carry your burden quietly was not pretending to be happy. It was refusing to hand your load to people who never earned it. The quiet man was the one others wanted near. Number 14, defend the man who isn't there. When a name came up that was not in the room, you said something fair or you said nothing. A shop foreman in Canton told his son that the man who gossips to you will gossip about you the moment you leave. So when the others tore into an absent man, you stayed quiet, or you found the one true good thing and said that instead. Men around you marked it. They understood, without a word, that their own name was safe in your mouth, whether they stood there or not. And men never forget who defended them when they were not there to hear it. Number 13, know a man's wife and children by name. You did not just know the man beside you. You knew his wife was Helen, and his boy had been sick, and his daughter had started school. A yardman in Roanoke asked after a co-worker's family by name every Monday for 15 years. To a tired man on a hard week, the question said someone had been carrying his people in mind when they were nowhere in sight. A man forgets 1,000 hellos. He never forgets the co-worker who remembered his daughter's name. Number 12, give full measure. Never leave a job half done. Here is the one that cuts against everything a young worker hears today. You did the job right, all the way to the corner no one would ever inspect, on days no one was watching. A bricklayer in St. Louis tuck-pointed the back of a wall facing an empty lot as carefully as the front facing the street. His apprentice asked why. He said the wall would know, and so would he. Modern advice says, do less and save yourself. But the men who gave full measure became the men foreman asked for by name across 3 counties. A man who never cut a corner is remembered as the one you could trust with anything. Number 11, settle every debt fast, to the penny. If a man spotted you $1 or covered your tab, you paid it back at the first chance, and you paid it exactly. A toolmaker in Worcester carried other men's small loans like a stone in his shoe until they were cleared. He would walk across town on a day off to return 40 cents. Pay a debt fast, and the friendship stayed clean. Men learned they could trust him with $100 because he had never once forgotten 40 cents. Trust gets built in 40-cent increments. He never skipped one. Number 10, take the blame, hand out the credit. When the crew did well, you named the men who did it out loud, where it counted. When the crew failed, you stepped forward and wore it alone. A gang boss in Birmingham gave credit in public and took correction in private, never once the reverse. The men under him would have followed him into a fire. It is the rarest courage there is to let others have the win and keep the loss for yourself. Hand the credit away, and loyalty is what comes back. Number 9, see your guest all the way out. You did not say goodbye from your chair. You walked a man to the door, onto the step, sometimes all the way to his car, and stood there until he had gone. A printer in Dubuque did it for every visitor, the banker and the beggar alike. He said the leaving was the part people remembered because it was the part you did not have to do. The welcome could be mere politeness. The long walk to the door was sincerity. It told a guest he had not been a chore to be finished. People forget how an evening began. They remember exactly how it ended and who stood in the doorway watching them go. In 2019, researchers studying first impressions ran an experiment they expected to settle quickly. They assumed modern professionals, trained in networking, would outperform older generations at building trust with strangers. They found the reverse. Adults raised on the pre-1970 standards, with the steady eye, the offered hand, the name spoken back, and the full attention given to one person, were rated more trustworthy by strangers inside the first 30 seconds than any other group tested. And months later, those same strangers remembered them at far higher rates. The old standards did not make a man slick. They made him legible. We did not outgrow those rules. We forgot that being trusted and being remembered were always built the same way. Number 8, wear your Sunday best out of respect. You did not dress for yourself. You dressed for the people you were about to face. A streetcar conductor in Scranton pressed his family's one good outfit every Saturday night and called a clean collar a letter of apology you never had to send. A man wore his best to church, to a funeral, to ask another man for work. It was never about money. He had almost none. It was effort made visible, the silent message that you judged the occasion and the people in it worth the trouble. A clean collar said more than a full wallet ever could. Number 7, speak to the boss and the sweeper the same way. A man's measure showed in how he treated the people who could do nothing for him. You gave the plant manager and the man who emptied the bins the same good morning, the same eye, the same respect. A pattern maker in Rockford was known for it across the whole works. He treated bosses like men, not gods, and laborers like men, not furniture. Kindness aimed upward is just ambition. Kindness aimed downward at someone who can never repay it is the real thing. The sweeper never forgot the foreman's son who learned his name. Number 6, show up, funerals, sickbeds, moving day. You went. When a friend had to move on a freezing Saturday, you were there with your truck before the coffee was cold. A welder in Buffalo never missed a funeral, a wake, or a moving day in 40 years. He said half of being a decent man was being present when it was easier to stay home. A man who showed up, body and time, said more by standing there than any card could. People forget what you said at the graveside. They never forget that you came. Number 5, be early or don't bother coming. On time was late. You arrived before you were needed every time without fail. A rail yard man in Cheyenne lived by the timetable and raised his son to treat every appointment like a departing train. To another man, an early arrival said you had counted his time worth more than your own comfort. Factory towns ran on it. A shift whistle did not wait. Lateness said your convenience came first. Earliness said theirs did. And a man who was never late became the one others set their watches by. Number 4, a handshake was a contract. What you agreed to with your hand, you did, though it cost you, though the world shifted, though nothing was in writing. A cooper in St. Paul shook on covering a sick man's root for a month, then worked 60 days straight when the man stayed down. His son watched him keep a word that grew heavier every week and never once heard him mention the weight. A handshake given lightly and kept completely was worth more than any signature a lawyer could draw. A contract can be broken in court. A man's hand, kept his whole life, is remembered as the thing itself. Number 3, your people eat first. Before your own rest, your own hunger, your own want, the people who depended on you were seen to. A textile worker in Lawrence came home emptied out, and before he sat down, once he checked the coal, the larder, and his children's shoes. His son said he never saw the man take the first or the best of anything in his life. This was the standard the fathers enforced above all others. To put others before yourself daily, with no applause and no audience. That was the entire meaning of the word gentleman. A man is not what he claims at the table. He is what he reaches for last. And the man who always reached last was never forgotten by the people he fed first. Number 2, say you're wrong in 4 words. No excuse, no long story, no soft edges to hide behind. You were wrong, you said so plainly, and you set it right. A stonemason in Trenton apologized to his crew in front of his son with 4 flat words and not 1 word of defense. The boy never forgot how small the words were or how much they bought. Men trusted a man who could say sorry without a speech, because the speech is where the excuses hide. An apology stretched long is just a defense in disguise. People forgive almost anything in a man who can say 4 honest words. 4 honest words bought back what 1,000 excuses would have spent. Number 1, remember one true thing about everyone you meet. That is the whole of it. No method, no system, no clever exception. You met a man, and somewhere in the talk, you caught one true thing. His boy's name, the bad knee, the town he came from, and you held on to it. The next time you saw him, you asked. A machinist in Hammond did it with every man he worked beside, and decades later, men he had known a single season still spoke of him by name. He remembers his whole life, the one who remembered him. Every other standard on this list was only this one in different clothes. Hold on to one true thing about a man, and you become the one thing he can never put down. None of these standards required a charm school, a coach, or a single dollar a working man did not have. They required a home where someone lived them in front of a boy too young to know he was being shaped. The men who came up before 1965 understood something we have spent 50 years unlearning. A gentleman is not born, and he is not a performance you switch on. He is built from repetition, the hat lifted 10,000 times, the name spoken back until it was a reflex, the match struck for the other man before his own. We called these rules stiff, old-fashioned. We replaced them with being ourselves and called it freedom, and now we stand in crowded rooms that feel full of strangers and cannot say why. The standards were never lost to time. They were set down on purpose by sons who believed they had outgrown them. The working man who lived them is still there, just inside the gate, holding the door, waiting. The only thing missing is a man willing to stand where he stood and mean it.